Some of you in the audience who have abstained from the dirigible of watching television, going to liberal school, or interacting with normies may have forgotten about this bizarre aspect of modern-day culture. If one turns on the daytime news, goes to a pep talk at a school, or watches modern television, they will quickly notice this strange aspect of social behavior. The heavily disabled of society are worshipped, extolled, and propped up by everyone else. Now, this is not a video about bashing the mentally ill and wheelchair-bound young people who get 15 minutes of fame on television. It is questioning the behavior of the people who parade them and the nature of that fame to begin with. Usually, the news anchors or television host will be having a normal show, then a person of physical or mental deformity will be wheeled out on stage. The host will try to treat them normally, but about 90% of the time it comes off as condescending despite their best efforts, as if they are baby-talking their guest. Generally, they will ask this person about the hardships of their condition, and then express excitement and sympathy about them overcoming adversity. Everyone in the audience will clap and cheer at the basic interactions of this person by virtue of them being disabled, regardless if what they said or did was interesting. Now you might say, Jeff, you're being ridiculous. This is just humans expressing sympathy to those that are less fortunate than them. Au contraire, if this was just an occasional thing or in the passing of meeting or interacting with a disabled person, I would agree with you. But it is the theme of show after show, appears constantly as a way to keep the average audience emotionally engaged, and now borders on the level of a cult of worship. In order to gain sympathy with people, television producers will no longer air some sob story about making ends meet with a bad job or raising children. Only when that child is mentally deformed does it become a heroic act. Cheers and praise are heaped endlessly when such a figure is available to be talked about. Game shows, news interviews, sport competitions, school speakers, and even produced TV shows will parade around the disabled whenever they can. One begins to get the feeling that this isn't simply a circumstance of fate, and that the people booking the speaker or holding the interview are just happening across disabled people to show on television. It has grown into a culture of piling one's sympathies on the disabled person and then receiving the mental reward for being so nice and virtuous to this weak and disabled fool who couldn't live on their own. It is not for the disabled person's benefit or edification they are wheeled into the public eye, but for the pleasure of the audience. And it has become a common motif in our society where strength and success are shunned, and equality and liberty become enshrined above all else. By the third time you listen to someone describe their battle with disability, you have to wonder what value is there in listening. You, the listener, are not disabled. Sure, their story may be interesting or inspiring by virtue of willpower, but one could get an equally interesting and more relatable story from any number of people. The reason I hypothesize this has become so commonplace is the feminization of society and culture from top to bottom. Since the government, schools, and media are maternal in form and function, although in a very disgusting and gross way instead of a nourishing and raising way, it is within their nature to promote and coddle the weak, and then ask for the praise of all around them for doing so. Oh, isn't it great you are clapping for this disabled person? This shows how good a person you are. Everyone say "ah" when they try to form a sentence. There is no real virtue in it. I'm not saying to be cruel to the weak and genetically disabled or cull them from society or any such stupid nonsense spouted by edgy eugenicists. What I am questioning is the worship they receive publicly, and if it has any value beyond the mental masturbation of the more fortunate non-disabled people. I have often rallied against government assistance for people in general, and I think the disabled are no exception. It would be up to a person's family to bear the cost and load of such a person and not the state and everyone else. It is not out of cruelty I say that money should be diverted away from these people in terrible shape, but out of a desire to see civilization flourish over individual humans or the goofy emotions of the moment. The seas were not sailed and colonized because the crown diverted tons of gold to maintain the wounds of lepers. It was because the men risking life and limb received their just reward. Increasingly in this society run on misguided maternal values, it is more rewarding to be disabled, lame, stupid, retarded, and cripple. Break your own legs, cut off your own dick, profess to be gender fluid and mentally challenged, and you'll be able to find some government port to receive a paycheck from. When increasingly the sweat of the hard-working man is spent on maintaining things like a morbidly obese woman on her third gastric bypass, it becomes difficult to justify working at all in such a deranged society. The taxpayers are powerless slaves in a sense. They will pontificate endlessly about how great and virtuous they are for contributing to the system, and they will complain about the wasted money, but not overly so. And year after year, their money will be siphoned away to protect the investments of the rich and maintain the lives of millions of invalids and drug addicts on the dole. And they will somehow convince themselves that they have political power, and could ever change this fact, despite it being the case for half a century at the least. It is hard to see the merit in being a taxpayer when one becomes ruled by the rich and ragged both. But this is an aside from the main topic at hand, this culture of worship and elevation of not just the unfortunate souls who suffer from some health ailment, but of the insane, the weak, and downtrodden in general. A particular instance recurs to me, where my school was having some nonsensical sports rally with mandatory participation in the main gymnasium. Near the end of the rally, a small cancer-ridden child was brought out, and people told in my rich suburban neighborhood to donate to the small cancerous 4-year-old's fund to go to Disney World. Now, donating is all well and good, but for some reason I was deeply disturbed by the whole affair. Why aren't we donating money to cancer research instead to try and solve the issue for other parents? Why doesn't Disney World pay out of pocket for the poor dying kid instead of the pockets of my town? Is the kid receiving a reward, or the people donating to feel self-righteous and charity for helping this poor child? Although I don't think it is truly the case, I felt that all around me were abusing this dying child as a means of self-gratification, to extol morals they neither had nor believed in. And I think this sense of self-gratification is what drives the cheers and claps whenever a decrepit person is wheeled out on television or stage. Some may call this social behavior the effects of biological Leninism, the dregs of society organizing behind the state to protect and enrich themselves to great effect. Ultimately, the root cause comes from the destruction of male virtue in society. No longer are the male virtues respected or given any credence, because why would they? The rulers all blast maternal ideas out of control and safety out of every media orifice. This is not to say there are no feminine values of merit, or that male values alone create the perfect society, but simply that the balance has shifted into a impotently stupid level of nannyism. Following this path to its conclusion, Harrison Bergeron will become more of a reality than it already is, and society will become without virtue and merit until it collapses and is invaded by some stronger society. These failed ideas must be expunged, and quickly, if the failing states of the West are to recover from their moral downward spiral.